Officer Jake Carter adjusted the brim of his snow-dusted patrol cap, the biting wind whipping around him as he surveyed the desolate stretch of highway. Beside him, Rex, his loyal K-9 partner, sat stoically, his thick German shepherd coat barely ruffled by the swirling snow. The patrol cruiser's tires hummed a low, monotonous tune against the accumulating layers of white, a stark contrast to the urgency bubbling beneath Jake's calm exterior. This wasn't just another night shift, the winter storm. Initially a light dusting, had escalated with alarming speed, transforming the familiar landscape into a treacherous expanse of ice and whiteouts. "All right, big guy," Jake murmured, his voice a low rumble of affection. Reaching down to scratch behind Rex's ears, Rex leaned into the touch, a low rumble of contentment echoing from his chest. Their bond was forged in countless hours of training, shared dangers, and unspoken understanding. Rex wasn't just a dog, he was Jake's shadow, his confidant, and in many ways, his anchor in the turbulent world of law enforcement. The call had come in barely 20 minutes ago. A suspicious abandoned vehicle off a secluded county road, deep within the Blackwood Forest. It was the kind of call that usually sent a chill down a seasoned officer's spine. Not just because of the isolation, but because it hinted at something more than a simple breakdown. Blackwood was known for its dense, unforgiving terrain, a labyrinth of ancient pines and hidden trails, often exploited by those who preferred to operate outside the law's watchful eye. As they veered off the main road, the asphalt quickly gave way to a snow-choked dirt track. The silence of the forest pressed in, broken only by the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the whine of the wind through the trees. Visibility plummeted, the headlights cutting a narrow, struggling beam through the dense curtain of snow. Jake's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Every instinct screamed caution, a primal warning that this was no ordinary missing car. Rex, usually vibrant and eager, seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. His ears swiveled, his nose twitching, taking in scents that were imperceptible to human senses. A low growl rumbled in his throat, barely audible over the storm, a clear sign that something was amiss. Jake's eyes flickered to the K-9, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Rex was rarely wrong. Easy. "Boy," Jake whispered. Though his own heart had begun to pick up its pace, he knew the risks. He'd faced down armed suspects, navigated deadly situations, but the eerie stillness of the snow-laden forest, combined with the escalating blizzard, felt different. It was a cold, creeping dread that had nothing to do with the temperature. As they pushed deeper, the tracks of the abandoned vehicle finally appeared in the fresh snow, leading them further away from the safety of the main road, into the heart of the storm-engulfed wilderness. The air grew heavy with anticipation, a silent prelude to the storm that was about to break. Not just from the sky, but from the shadows within. The abandoned vehicle, a battered sedan, sat askew in a small clearing, its windows opaque with frost and its engine long since cooled. Snow had already begun to drift around its tires, almost as if the forest was trying to reclaim it. Jake approached cautiously, Rex a silent, watchful shadow at his side. The K-9's ears were perked, his powerful body tensed, radiating an alertness that Jake instinctively trusted. Every fiber of Jake's being told him something was wrong. There was no sign of a struggle, no tracks leading away from the car. Just an unsettling stillness that the swirling snow only amplified. "Stay sharp, Rex," Jake murmured, unholstering his weapon. The metallic click echoed unnaturally in the heavy silence. He moved around the vehicle, checking the doors, which were all unlocked. This alone was odd, even in a hurry. Most people would secure their car. As he peered into the murky interior, a faint, almost imperceptible scent hit Rex's sensitive nose, something sharp, metallic, and distinctly out of place in the wild. Rex let out a low, guttural growl, his hackles rising. His gaze wasn't fixed on the car, but on the dense tree line beyond. Where the shadows stretched long and distorted in the fading light, before Jake could react, a sudden, blinding flash erupted from the darkness, followed by the deafening crack of a gunshot. Pain exploded in Jake's chest, a searing heat that knocked the air from his lungs. He stumbled backward, dropping his weapon, a gasp tearing through his lips as he collapsed into the deepening snow. The world spun, the pristine white ground blurring into a chaotic mess of dark splotches. He tried to push himself up, but his limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, his body succumbing to a profound weakness. Another shot rang out, closer this time, and Rex, despite his protective instincts, let out a sharp yelp of pain. A whimper escaped him as he stumbled, his front leg buckling beneath him. A bullet had grazed his shoulder, a shallow but painful wound that bled steadily into his white fur. But even as the pain lanced through him, Rex's focus never wavered from Jake. He dragged himself towards his fallen partner, a fierce, guttural bark tearing from his throat, a sound of defiance and desperate loyalty. He nudged Jake's head, whimpering, trying to rouse him. But Jake remained still, his eyes unfocused, breath coming in shallow. Ragged gasps. The assailant, a shadowy figure emerging briefly from the trees, seemed to hesitate, then melted back into the blizzard. Confident their job was done. They hadn't accounted for the unwavering devotion of a K9, the snow, previously a gentle cascade, now intensified into a furious maelstrom, blanketing everything in a thick, swirling whiteout. It was as if the storm itself sought to bury the truth, to erase the evidence of the ambush. Rex, wounded and shivering, nudged Jake again, whining pitifully. His powerful senses picked up the fading scent of the assailant, but his priority was his partner. He lay down beside Jake, his body a shield against the relentless wind and snow, his whimpers turning into soft, mournful cries. The blood from his shoulder wound stained the snow crimson, but he didn't care. His world had shrunk to this single, crucial purpose: protecting Jake. No matter the cost, the blizzard raged, threatening to consume them both. But Rex, the loyal K9, refused to yield. The blizzard raged on, a white fury that swallowed the world in its icy embrace. Hours bled into an indistinguishable expanse of wind and swirling snow. For Rex, time ceased to be a linear progression. It was a relentless assault of cold and fear. His initial desperate barks had long since faded into hoarse whimpers, his strength ebbing with every passing minute. The wound on his shoulder throbbed, a dull ache beneath the sharp sting of the freezing air. But the pain was secondary to the chilling cold seeping into Jake's unmoving form. Rex pressed closer to Jake, his own body shivering uncontrollably. But he held his ground, a living shield. He nudged Jake's face again, his wet nose brushing against cold skin, letting out a soft, mournful cry. There was no response, only the shallow, ragged sound of Jake's breathing, a fragile whisper against the storm's roar. A pang of raw, animalistic grief shot through Rex. He didn't understand what had happened, only that his partner, his human, was in danger. And he couldn't fix it. Memories, sharp and vivid, flickered through Rex's mind, a desperate attempt to cling to the warmth of their shared past. He remembered their first meeting at the K9 training facility, a boisterous pup full of boundless energy, meeting the quiet, patient officer who would become his world. He recalled the countless hours of training, the scent work, the bite exercises, the way Jake's hand would always be there to offer a reassuring pat, a whispered, "Good boy." He remembered their first big bust, tracking a suspect through a dense urban jungle. Jake's pride evident in his beaming smile and enthusiastic praise. There was the time Jake had nursed him back from a nasty thorn injury, painstakingly cleaning the wound, his touch gentle and sure. Every memory was a testament to their unbreakable bond, a bond of trust, loyalty, and unconditional love. And now, that bond was being tested by the cruel indifference of the wilderness. Rex tried to dig at the snow around Jake, a futile attempt to create a deeper burrow to offer more shelter. His paws, already numb, scraped against the frozen earth beneath the deepening drifts. He whined, a high-pitched lament that was snatched away by the wind. He was a creature of instinct and training. But in this moment, instinct was screaming at him to find shelter, and training was demanding he stay. Loyalty, a force stronger than any command, kept him anchored to Jake's side. He lowered his head onto Jake's chest, listening intently for the rhythmic thump of his heart, a sound he knew so well from countless rides in the patrol car, countless nights where Jake's hand would rest on his head. The faint, steady beat was a fragile comfort, a testament that life still clung on. However precariously, he could feel Jake's body temperature dropping, a terrifying reality that spurred him to action. He began to lick Jake's face, a desperate, futile gesture, trying to warm him, to bring him back. The blizzard showed no signs of relenting. Snow continued to fall thick and fast, burying them deeper, threatening to erase their presence from the desolate landscape entirely. Rex's fur, once a proud shield, was now matted with ice and snow, his shivering growing more violent. The pain in his shoulder was a constant companion, but it was the cold, numbing his paws and seeping into his bones. That was the most insidious enemy. He was a K9 trained for resilience, but even the strongest spirit could be worn down by the relentless grip of nature. Yet, even as his vision blurred and exhaustion threatened to claim him, one thought remained paramount: he would not leave. He would not abandon his officer. Not now. Not ever. Miles away, nestled in a secluded cabin overlooking the same snow-choked forest. Marcus Thorne nursed a glass of amber liquid, the warmth of a crackling fire doing little to thaw the iciness in his gaze. He watched the blizzard rage outside, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. The operation was going smoothly, flawlessly even. The package, as he referred to the illicit cargo he was moving, was secured, and the unexpected interference had been dealt with. Thorne was a man carved from ambition and deceit, a former Black Ops operative who had long since traded patriotism for profit. He ran a sophisticated underground network, exploiting the very wilderness he now called home to smuggle high value. Untraceable goods, his current venture. A shipment of stolen rare earth minerals was particularly lucrative, and he had meticulously planned every detail. The abandoned vehicle, a decoy, had served its purpose, luring the local authorities into the remote depths of the forest. Far from his real operations, he recalled the brief, chilling moment he'd seen the K9 unit, a police officer and his dog. A minor inconvenience, easily eliminated. He'd fired 2 shots, one for the officer, one for the dog, a clean, efficient job. He prided himself on his precision, his ability to leave no trace. The snowstorm was a godsend, a natural blanket that would bury any evidence, ensuring that by morning, the wilderness would have swallowed any trace of his night's work. "Boss, everything's in place." A gruff voice crackled over his encrypted satellite phone. It was Petrov, his second in command, a man as ruthless and calculating as Thorne himself. "The exchange point is clear. No interference." "Excellent." "Petrov," Thorne replied, his voice a low, gravelly purr. "Just as planned, the weather bought us the perfect window, and the local boys, they won't be a problem." He allowed himself a brief, dark chuckle. especially not the one who decided to take a scenic detour. He didn't bother to check if the officer and his dog were truly gone. In his world, a fallen opponent in a blizzard was as good as dead. He had too much at stake, too many years invested in building his empire. To let a single police patrol derail his plans? His network was vast, reaching into various government agencies and private sectors, allowing him to operate with impunity. He had informants, moles, and enough financial leverage to make inconvenient truths disappear. The thought of a K-9 unit uncovering his meticulously crafted web was laughable. Dogs were loyal, yes, but ultimately just animals, unbeknownst to Thorne. The very loyalty he scoffed at was battling for survival just miles away. He was confident, even arrogant. In his success, he imagined the headlines tomorrow. If the bodies were ever found officers lost in tragic blizzard, a simple, tragic accident. No questions asked. His face, illuminated by the flickering firelight, showed no remorse, no flicker of doubt, only a cold, calculating satisfaction. He poured himself another drink. The clinking of ice cubes the only sound in the well-insulated cabin. Aside from the persistent wail of the wind outside, the world, to Marcus Thorne, was a chessboard, and he was always several moves ahead. The incident in the forest was merely a pawn sacrificed, a negligible cost for the grander scheme. He leaned back in his leather armchair, the warmth of the fire a stark contrast to the icy heart beating within his chest. He was untouchable. He was invisible. And soon, his operation would be complete, yielding a fortune that would cement his power, allowing him to disappear once more into the shadows, leaving no ripple behind. The hours crawled by, each one a torment for Rex. The storm seemed to have reached its crescendo, the wind a banshee wail through the skeletal branches of the pines, the snow a thick, impenetrable curtain. Jake's breathing had grown shallower, more sporadic, and Rex, his every instinct honed to his partner's well-being, felt a chilling dread grip him. He whined, a sound so raw and mournful it was almost human, nudging Jake's hand with his nose, desperately trying to elicit a response. Nothing. Just the slow, steady bleed of warmth from Jake's body into the unforgiving snow. Rex was weakening too. His wounded shoulder throbbed with a persistent, fiery ache, and the cold had seeped deep into his bones, leaving him stiff and lethargic. Hunger gnawed at him, a dull, insistent pang. But the primal urge to protect Jake dwarfed all other sensations. His eyes, usually bright and alert, were now heavy-lidded, his gaze fixed on his unconscious partner. A silent vigil against the encroaching darkness, just as the last vestiges of hope threatened to extinguish in his weary canine heart. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor reached his sensitive ears. It was a distant sound, muffled by the blizzard, but distinct enough to register. Not the howl of the wind, nor the creak of icy branches, but something mechanical, something human. He lifted his head, straining his senses, trying to pinpoint its origin. It was sporadic, fading in and out, like a phantom in the storm. But it was there, a snowmobile, the faint thrum of an engine, the distant whir of tracks on snow, was a lifeline, a whisper of a possibility in the vast, indifferent wilderness. Rex's ears swiveled, his body tensing, not with alarm, but with a sudden, electrifying surge of renewed purpose. His tail gave a single, weak thump against the snow. There was someone out there, someone who might be able to help. He tried to bark, but his throat was raw, only a pitiful croak escaping. He nudged Jake again, more urgently this time, then looked towards the direction of the sound. His mind, usually so focused on commands and sense, was now gripped by a single, desperate strategy. He had to alert them. He couldn't leave Jake. Not truly, but he could draw attention, with a monumental effort. Rex pushed himself to his feet, swaying precariously. Every muscle screamed in protest, his wounded leg threatening to buckle beneath him. He took a hesitant step away from Jake, then another, his eyes constantly darting back to his partner's still form. The snowmobile sound was growing infinitesimally louder, closer. It was a faint, almost hopeless chance. But it was their only chance. He let out another croak, then a slightly stronger whine, pouring every ounce of his remaining energy into the sound. He limped a few feet, then stopped. Looking back at Jake, his heart ached, torn between his unwavering loyalty to stay and the desperate need to save. But his training, his innate intelligence, told him that staying silent would mean certain doom for them both. The sound of the snowmobile briefly intensified, then seemed to veer away, the engine note fading back into the roar of the blizzard. A wave of despair washed over Rex, so potent it threatened to drop him back into the snow. Had they missed it? Was this their last chance? Snatched away by the cruel storm, but then, with a final valiant surge of energy born from pure desperation, Rex lifted his head towards the sky and let out a howl. It was a broken, pained sound, but it carried the raw, unyielding plea of a loyal companion fighting for his partner's life. A sound that, if heard, would pierce through the storm and into the heart of anyone who heard it. He howled again, and again, until his throat burned, a beacon of canine devotion against the white oblivion. Miles away, a solitary snowmobile cut a solitary path through the raging blizzard. At its helm was Ilara Vance, a woman in her late 50s, her face etched with the lines of a life lived close to the harsh realities of nature. She was a park ranger, one of the few who braved the deeper, more remote sections of Blackwood Forest, even in the worst weather. Checking on emergency shelters and wildlife sensors, her existence was one of quiet solitude, preferring the company of the ancient trees and the crisp, clean air to the clamor of human society. Ilara was a creature of habit, and her route this evening was a familiar one. But tonight, something was different. The storm, fierce and unyielding, usually swallowed all sound. Yet she thought she'd heard something. A faint, almost ghostly wail carried on the wind. She dismissed it at first, attributing it to the storm's tricks on her ears, or perhaps a lone wolf. But then it came again, a desperate, pained sound that snagged at her heart. It wasn't the howl of a wild animal. It was too urgent, too human in its despair. Despite its canine origin, she slowed her snowmobile. Peering through the swirling white curtain, the sound was faint, directional, and definitely not part of the natural symphony of the blizzard. Her years of experience in the wilderness had taught her to trust her instincts, especially when they whispered of distress. She knew this part of the forest well, its hidden nooks and treacherous ravines. This was no place for anyone to be lost, let alone in such a storm, with a deep breath. Ilara veered off her usual path, guiding the snowmobile towards the source of the sound, a flicker of concern overriding her usual pragmatism. The snow was deep here, untouched by human presence, and the going was slow. The engine whined in protest, but Ilara pushed forward, her eyes scanning the desolate landscape, her ears straining. Then, through a brief, agonizing lull in the swirling snow, she saw it, a dark shape against the pristine white. Her heart lurched as she drew closer. The shape resolved itself into a figure huddled on the ground, almost completely buried by drifts, and beside it, a German shepherd, its head lifted, a pained, guttural cry tearing from its throat. Rex's howl, raw and desperate, finally reached her, cutting through the roaring wind with an almost physical force. It wasn't just a sound, it was a plea, a testament to unwavering loyalty. Alara killed the snowmobile's engine. The sudden silence deafening save for the raging storm and the dogs continued. Weak cries. She dismounted quickly, pulling her emergency first aid kit and a thermal blanket from her sled. "Hello," she called out, her voice barely carrying in the wind. "Anyone there?" As she approached. The full horror of the scene became apparent. The figure on the ground was a man, clearly in a police uniform. His face ashen, a dark stain spreading on his chest. And the dog. The German Shepherd was at K9, its own shoulder bleeding, but it remained steadfast. Its body curled protectively around the officer. The dog's eyes, filled with an intelligent, almost desperate urgency, met hers. There was no aggression, only a profound, silent plea for help. Alara's breath hitched. This wasn't just a lost hiker. This was an officer, gravely wounded, and his fiercely loyal K9 partner, both battling against impossible odds. The dog, despite its obvious pain and exhaustion, nudged the officer with its nose, then looked back at her, as if urging her to hurry. It was a silent, powerful communication that bypassed words entirely. "Oh, you poor things," Alara murmured, her voice filled with a sudden, overwhelming empathy. She knelt beside Jake, her experienced eyes quickly assessing his condition. He was hypothermic, and the wound looked severe. Time was of the essence. She glanced at Rex, who had slumped back down, exhausted but still watching her every move. "Don't worry, boy," she said softly, reaching out a hand, which Rex tentatively sniffed before allowing a gentle touch. "We're going to get him out of here." The task seemed insurmountable. Jake was a large man, and the snow was deep. Treacherous? Alara knew she couldn't move him alone. She looked around, her mind racing. There had to be a way. The K9's refusal to leave its officer, wounded and in such a storm, was a testament to a bond she rarely witnessed. A bond that demanded her utmost effort in return. Alara Vance worked with the practiced efficiency of someone who had faced the raw power of nature countless times. Her initial assessment of Officer Carter was grim. Severe hypothermia. Blood loss from a gunshot wound that looked dangerously close to his vital organs. And the increasing cold. He was fading fast. Rex, still at Jake's side, watched her with an intelligent intensity. A silent plea in his eyes that spurred her on. "Okay, big guy," she murmured to Rex, her voice calm despite the rising panic in her chest. "We need to get him off the snow." Her snowmobile's sled was designed for hauling equipment, not unconscious men, but it was their only option. She quickly unlatched her emergency survival tarp, a heavy-duty, insulated sheet, and spread it on the snow next to Jake. The challenge was immense. Jake was a dead weight, and the biting wind was relentless. "Can you help me?" "Boy," Alara asked Rex, not expecting a verbal answer, but a flicker of understanding. Rex, despite his own throbbing shoulder, seemed to grasp the urgency. When Alara tried to maneuver Jake onto the tarp, his large, limp body resisting her efforts, Rex began to push and nudge with his head and good shoulder, whimpering encouragement. It was a Herculean effort for the wounded dog, but his determination was absolute. Together. The unlikely pair strained. Alara pulling, Rex pushing, until they managed to slide Jake's heavy form onto the tarp. Alara then carefully wrapped him in the thermal blanket, tucking it snugly around him to retain any precious body heat. His skin was alarmingly cold to the touch. The next challenge was getting Jake onto the sled. Alara eyed her snowmobile, then the officer. She knew she couldn't lift him. Her gaze fell on the thick, sturdy rope she used for securing her gear. An idea, desperate but plausible. Formed in her mind, she fashioned a makeshift harness around Jake's torso with the rope, then secured the other end to the back of her snowmobile. It was crude, but it might work. She started the engine, the roar cutting through the storm, and eased the snowmobile forward. Slowly, carefully, pulling the tarp with Jake on it towards the sled. Rex, understanding, kept pace beside them, his nose nudging Jake's head reassuringly, once Jake was alongside the sled. Ilara faced another dilemma. She needed to lift him into it, or at least slide him on. That's when Rex surprised her again, with a low growl of effort. He braced himself against the side of the sled, using his strong body to create leverage. Ilara pulled Jake's upper body with all her might, and with Rex's unexpected assistance. They managed to roll Jake's unconscious form awkwardly into the sled. It wasn't graceful, but he was off the ground, shielded, and somewhat insulated. Ilara quickly covered him with another layer of insulated canvas, securing him as best she could. She then turned her attention to Rex. His wound, though not deep, was still bleeding, and the exposed skin was raw from the cold. She pulled out a small, emergency pet first aid kit. "Let's get you patched up." "Brave boy," she murmured, her hands gentle as she cleaned the wound and applied a temporary bandage. Rex flinched slightly but stood remarkably still, as if understanding she was helping him. Once done, he immediately went back to lie as close as possible to Jake, his body pressed against the sled, offering what little warmth he could. Ilara knew she had to get them to the nearest ranger outpost, an old, isolated cabin equipped with a radio and basic medical supplies. It was still miles away, through the worst of the storm, but it was their best hope. She climbed back onto her snowmobile, her heart pounding with a mix of exhaustion and grim determination. As she started the engine, she looked back at Rex, who had settled beside Jake, his eyes fixed on his partner. The dog's unwavering loyalty in the face of such adversity filled her with a profound sense of awe and a renewed commitment. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a testament to the extraordinary bond between a man and his dog. A bond that had defied the crushing power of the blizzard. The journey to the ranger outpost was a brutal test of endurance against the elements. Ilara, hunched over the snowmobile, battled not only the deepening snowdrifts and plummeting temperatures, but also the gnawing fear that she might be too late. The visibility was almost zero, the world reduced to a swirling vortex of white, and the wind screamed like a banshee in her ears, every few minutes. She'd glance back, her powerful headlamp cutting through the gloom, to check on Jake and Rex. Jake lay motionless in the sled, a still form beneath the thermal blankets, his breath a faint mist in the freezing air. Rex, ever vigilant, was curled tightly beside him, his head resting on Jake's hip, as if willing his warmth and strength into his human partner, despite his own injury and the profound exhaustion. The K9 never stirred from his post, a silent sentinel in the heart of the storm. Ilara knew the forest like the back of her hand, but the blizzard had transformed the familiar landscape into an alien, treacherous terrain. She navigated by instinct, by the subtle contours of the land beneath the snow, by the whisper of the wind through specific stands of trees. She avoided ravines that were now hidden traps, and navigated slopes that had become slick with ice. Her face, already weathered, was now chapped and raw from the relentless assault of the wind and snow. Suddenly, the snowmobile lurched violently. Ilara fought the handlebars, trying to regain control, but the tracks lost purchase on a hidden patch of ice. The machine skidded, spinning wildly before slamming into a snow-covered embankment. Ilara was thrown clear, landing hard in a deep drift. The engine sputtered, then died, leaving an abrupt, terrifying silence broken only by the howl of the wind. "No!" Ilara gasped. Scrambling out of the snow, her leg throbbed from the impact, but she ignored it, her eyes fixed on the sled. It had decoupled from the snowmobile, sliding a few feet away, but thankfully, It hadn't overturned. Jake was still secure, and Rex, startled, was immediately alert, whining softly and nudging Jake, checking on him. Panic flared in Alara's chest. Without the snowmobile, their chances plummeted to near zero. They were still at least an hour from the outpost on foot, a distance that felt insurmountable in this weather. With a critically injured man? She tried to restart the snowmobile, pulling the cord again and again, but the engine remained stubbornly silent, choked by ice or perhaps damaged in the impact. Rex, sensing her distress, let out a low whimper. He looked from the broken snowmobile to Alara, then back to Jake, an intelligent understanding in his eyes. He rose slowly, limping over to the snowmobile, sniffing at the engine, then at Alara's hand, as if asking what was wrong. "It's no good, boy," Alara said, her voice hoarse with despair. "She's dead. We're on foot." She looked at the daunting white expanse ahead. "And he's too heavy." Rex, however, wasn't giving up. He barked once, a sharp, insistent sound, then moved back to Jake's sled. He looked at Alara, then back towards the direction they needed to go, then to the rope still attached to the sled. It was as if he was telling her there's still a way. "We can pull him." Alara stared at the K9 incredulity warring with a surge of desperate hope. "Yub, you mean you can help me pull him?" she asked, her voice disbelieving. Rex whined, then nudged the rope with his nose. Looking at her expectantly, it was a crazy idea. Rex was wounded, exhausted, and barely able to stand steadily himself. But his eyes, unwavering, held a fierce resolve. He wasn't just a dog, he was a partner, a beacon of loyalty. "All right, boy," Alara said, a new determination hardening her gaze. She unhooked the rope from the broken snowmobile and fashioned a loop, placing it carefully around Rex's sturdy chest, just behind his good shoulder. She then took the other end, securing it to her own waist. "Together then," she muttered, gritting her teeth against the cold and the pain in her leg, with Rex straining against the rope, pulling with surprising strength despite his limp. And Alara digging her boots into the snow, pushing the sled from behind. They began their agonizingly slow journey once more. Every step was a battle, every breath a frozen gasp. The blizzard raged, the wilderness tested, but the combined unwavering will of a park ranger and a wounded K9 pushed forward, refusing to surrender their precious cargo to the unforgiving night. The ranger outpost, a sturdy log cabin nestled in a small, sheltered hollow, finally appeared through the swirling snow like a mirage. Its single small window glowed with a faint, welcoming light, a beacon of hope in the relentless darkness. Alara, her muscles screaming in protest, felt a surge of adrenaline. They had made it, with a final, desperate push. She and Rex dragged the sled right up to the cabin door. Alara's hands fumbled with the frozen latch, her fingers stiff and numb. Inside, the air was cold but still, a stark relief from the biting wind. She quickly lit the old kerosene lamp, its warm glow dispelling the shadows. Her first priority was Jake. She carefully slid him from the sled onto the worn cot by the small wood stove, which she quickly stoked to life. The warmth would be slow to return, but it was a start. She peeled away his soaked outer layers, revealing the blood-soaked uniform beneath. The gunshot wound was ugly, a dark, bruised entry point. She cleaned it as best she could with sterile wipes from her kit, then applied pressure with thick gauze. He needed a doctor, and fast. Next, she turned to Rex. The loyal K9, shivering violently, had collapsed beside the cot, his eyes still fixed on Jake. Alara gently examined his shoulder wound. It was not as severe as Jake's, but it was raw and inflamed. She disinfected it thoroughly and applied a clean, padded bandage. Her touch firm but kind. Rex whined softly, but allowed her to work. His trust in her palpable. "You're a hero. You know that." "Boy," Ilara whispered, scratching behind his ears. Rex leaned into her hand, a deep, tired sigh escaping him. She found an old, thick wool blanket and draped it over him, then poured some water into a bowl. Rex drank greedily, then settled into a shivering heap, finally allowing exhaustion to claim him. Though his gaze remained occasionally fixed on Jake, Ilara then moved to the old radio, her lifeline to the outside world. She flipped the switch, and the static hummed to life. Blackwood Ranger Station to dispatch. Do you copy? This is Ranger Vance. Urgent medical assistance required. The air crackled with interference, the blizzard making communication difficult. She repeated her plea, her voice strained. Finally, a faint, distant voice responded. Ranger Vance, this is dispatch. Barely hearing you. Repeat transmission. Ilara recounted the situation as clearly and concisely as possible a police officer. Shot. Hypothermic. Found deep in the forest. His K-9 partner. Also wounded. She gave her coordinates, emphasizing the urgency. Understood. Ranger Vance. The voice, now slightly clearer, replied, We're scrambling a rescue team. The storm is making air rescue impossible. Ground teams will take hours. Perhaps longer with these conditions. Can you stabilize the officer? Doing my best, Ilara replied, her gaze sweeping over Jake's pale face. He needs more than I can give him here. Massive blood loss. Likely internal injuries. I found something near him. A small, strange metal casing. Looked like nothing I've ever seen from a standard firearm. The line crackled again, a pause stretching between them. A casing? Can you describe it? It's about an inch long, dark, with a peculiar ridge pattern. Almost custom-made. Ilara described, remembering the glint of metal she'd seen briefly as she moved Jake. It was a small detail, but it had stuck in her mind. Out of place in the natural wilderness? Understood. Ranger, that's highly unusual. We'll alert the department. Just focus on keeping him alive. We're on our way. Ilara hung up, a fresh wave of dread washing over her. A custom casing. This was no random hunting accident or simple robbery gone wrong. This was targeted. Professional. Jake Carter hadn't just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. As she rechecked Jake's pulse, a growing suspicion began to form in her mind. A secret. Perhaps that had almost cost him his life. Days later, the sterile hum of the hospital room was a stark contrast to the howling blizzard that had nearly claimed him. Jake Carter slowly swam back into consciousness, his head a muddled fog, his chest aching with a dull, persistent throb. The first thing he registered was the familiar weight on the side of his bed. A soft, rhythmic breathing. He turned his head with effort. And there, curled up on a special mat, was Rex, his loyal partner, his eyes blinking open. A low rumble of contentment vibrating in his chest as he saw Jake awake. Rex, Jake croaked, his voice hoarse. He reached out a trembling hand, and Rex immediately nudged it, licking his fingers with gentle affection. The sight of his K-9 bandaged but alive brought a wave of profound relief. Cutting through the haze of pain and medication, a nurse, a kind-faced woman, bustled in, her smile widening. Officer Carter, you're awake. That's wonderful news. You had us all worried, and your faithful companion here has barely left your side. Jake tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his chest made him wince. What? What happened? The nurse explained in soft tones about the blizzard. The rescue by Ranger Ilara Vance, and the severity of his injuries. You were lucky, officer. Very lucky. If it weren't for Ranger Vance and Rex, you wouldn't be here. As the fog in his mind began to clear, fragmented memories surfaced. The abandoned car, the sudden flash, the searing pain, The ambush. He remembered the distinct, almost unnatural silence after the shots. And then, nothing. The assailant? Just then, Detective Miller, a gruff but respected veteran, entered the room, a somber expression on his face. He nodded to the nurse, who quietly left, then sat by Jake's bedside. "Carter, good to see you awake." "Son, you gave us all a scare. What happened?" "Miller," Jake asked again, his voice gaining a little strength. "The car, the shots. Was it just a random act?" Miller's gaze was grave. "No, Jake. Not random at all. Ranger Vance found something at the scene. A unique shell casing. It's not standard issue, not even close. And when we went back, the entire area was clean. Too clean. Like someone meticulously swept it for evidence. Despite the storm, whoever did this, they knew what they were doing." Jake closed his eyes, a chill unrelated to his hypothermia spreading through him. "I remember the car. It was a decoy. I felt it. Like I was being led somewhere." Miller nodded. "We think you stumbled onto something big. Jake, something that whoever's behind this wanted kept secret. Your patrol route that night, it put you right in the middle of a major smuggling operation. Rare earth minerals, high-grade stuff. Been moving through Blackwood for months under our noses. And it's not just some small-time outfit. There are powerful people involved. Jake, people with connections that reach higher than you'd believe." The detective paused, his eyes narrowing. "The casing you mentioned to Ranger Vance. It matches a very specific, custom-made firearm. We've traced it to a known black market arms dealer, but he's gone dark. What's more disturbing? We believe there's a mole, someone on the inside, feeding information to these criminals. That's how they knew your movements. That's how they knew where to ambush you." A cold rage began to simmer within Jake. He had been betrayed. His own department. Compromised. And it had nearly cost him his life. And Rex's... His gaze fell on Rex, who had now laid his head on Jake's hand, looking up at him with unwavering devotion. The K-9 had risked everything, endured unimaginable hardship. To stay by his side, that loyalty, that profound sacrifice, ignited a fierce determination in Jake. They won't get away with this. "Miller," Jake said, his voice low and firm. "We're going to find them, every single one of them, and we're going to shut them down." Miller saw the fire in Jake's eyes, the steely resolve that had always made him a formidable officer. He knew Jake wouldn't rest until justice was served. Not just for himself, but for Rex, and for the integrity of the badge they both wore. The road to recovery would be long, but the path to justice had just begun. The investigation that followed Jake's recovery was a labyrinthine tangle of dead ends and frustrating roadblocks. Detective Miller, despite his experience, found himself repeatedly stymied. Witnesses who had initially offered vague tips suddenly clammed up. Leads that seemed promising dissolved into thin air. It became clear that the conspiracy ran deeper than just a simple smuggling ring. It had tentacles reaching into unexpected places, from his hospital bed, then from home during his arduous physical therapy. Jake became an unofficial but relentless part of the investigation. His photographic memory of the ambush site, combined with Rex's highly attuned senses, proved invaluable, while Jake couldn't yet be in the field. He meticulously analyzed maps, cross-referenced surveillance footage from nearby towns, and pored over every piece of intelligence Miller brought him. The way they moved. Jake explained to Miller one afternoon, pointing at a map of Blackwood Forest spread across his lap. They knew the land, knew the hidden trails. These aren't just city slickers with a contact. They're professionals. Or they've been operating out here for a long time. Rex, now fully recovered from his shoulder wound and radiating restless energy, paced the room, occasionally nudging Jake's hand, His presence was a constant reminder of what they had endured and what they were fighting for. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, triggered by Rex. Miller had brought over a collection of items seized from a low-level trafficker, picked up on an unrelated charge, mostly mundane personal effects. But among them was a tattered, mud-stained hiking boot. Rex, who had been lazily chewing on a squeaky toy, suddenly stiffened. His ears perked up, his nose flared, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it?" Boy Jake asked, noticing the shift in Rex's demeanor. Rex abandoned his toy and moved to the bag, sniffing frantically at the boot. He then looked at Jake, then at Miller, and let out a series of insistent barks. Scratching at the boot. "He's onto something," Miller said, intrigued. "You think he recognizes a scent?" Jake nodded, a thrill of excitement coursing through him. "It's possible. He has an uncanny memory for scents, especially those associated with danger." They brought the boot to the K9 unit's expert, who confirmed that the scent profile on it was highly unusual, a unique blend of pine resin, damp earth, and a faint, almost metallic odor that was hard to identify. It was a signature, a trace left behind. Armed with this, and Rex's unerring ability, they had a new lead. The scent led them to a series of remote, long-abandoned logging trails deep within Blackwood Forest. Trails that were too overgrown for most vehicles, but perfect for small, all-terrain transport. It was days of painstaking work. With Jake, still not fully cleared for duty, but utterly determined, driving a modified ATV, and Rex, harnessed and focused. Leading the way, Miller and a small, trusted team followed closely behind. The trails eventually led them to a dilapidated hunting lodge, hidden deep within a thick grove of trees. It looked innocuous from the outside, but Rex's agitated barks and frantic sniffing around the perimeter confirmed their suspicions. This was a staging point, a nexus for the illegal operation. Inside, they found evidence of sophisticated equipment, satellite phones, high-grade packing materials, and traces of rare earth minerals. They also found a single, spent shell casing, identical to the one Alara Vance had described. It was a match. "We're close. Jake," Miller said, his voice grim. "This confirms it. They're using this place. And the one who shot you, they've been here." As they processed the scene, Rex suddenly became agitated again, his attention drawn to a loose floorboard near a dusty fireplace. He pawed at it frantically, whining. Jake knelt, his heart pounding, and pried the board loose. Beneath it, nestled in a hidden compartment, was a small, encrypted hard drive and a stack of ledgers. This was it, the motherlode. The ledgers detailed shipments, dates, and, most crucially, a list of names. Not just faceless criminals, but seemingly legitimate business owners, politicians, and even a couple of high-ranking police officials. The mole was among them. The revelation sent a cold shockwave through Jake. The betrayal was far deeper, far more insidious than he had imagined. But now they had the proof, and the pursuit finally could truly begin. The discovery of the hidden hard drive and ledgers ignited a furious, highly confidential investigation. Detective Miller and Jake, now officially reinstated and with Rex back by his side, worked almost around the clock. The information they had unearthed was explosive, revealing a criminal enterprise far more extensive and deeply embedded than anyone had dared to imagine. The network stretched beyond state lines, touching politicians, high-ranking law enforcement officials, and seemingly legitimate businesses. The scale of the betrayal was staggering. The primary target identified from the ledgers was Marcus Thorne, a ghost in the system, known only through whispers and shadows until now. His name appeared repeatedly, linked to the largest, most profitable mineral shipments and to the cryptic entries that hinted at troublesome elements being removed. It was clear he was the mastermind, the one who had ordered the hit on Jake. Jake and Miller, along with a handpicked, fully vetted team from an internal affairs unit, began their pursuit. It wasn't a traditional manhunt. Thorne was too careful, too connected, instead. It was a cat and mouse game, painstakingly tracking digital footprints, financial transactions, and the movements of his known associates. Rex became indispensable. His ability to track faint, residual sense, combined with his unwavering focus, allowed them to confirm Thorne's various safe houses and transport routes. There were close calls. One evening, tracking a known associate through a dense urban area, Rex suddenly pulled hard on his leash, barking agitatedly at a seemingly innocuous delivery van. Instinct told Jake to listen. A quick search of the van, against the protests of its driver, revealed a hidden compartment filled with surveillance equipment, clearly intended to monitor their movements. They were being watched, just as Thorne thought he was watching them. The tension escalated with each passing day. The air was thick with the silent threat of unseen eyes and unheard conversations. Jake knew they were moving closer to Thorne, and Thorne, sensing the tightening net, would become even more dangerous. Their pursuit eventually led them back to Blackwood Forest. The scene of Jake's near demise, intelligence suggested Thorne was preparing his largest and final shipment, a desperate move to liquidate his assets and disappear. His new staging point was deep within an abandoned mining complex, a sprawling, forgotten network of tunnels and shafts, perfect for illicit operations. The weather, a cruel twist of fate, began to turn again. A late-season snowstorm was brewing, threatening to blanket the forest once more. It was a race against time and nature. "He's making his move," Miller stated grimly, reviewing the satellite images of the complex. "This is it, Jake. Final push." As they prepared for the raid, a chilling piece of information came through. The mole had been identified. It was Captain Davies, a highly respected, long-serving officer within their own department. The betrayal cut deep, a wound as painful as any physical injury. Davies had been feeding Thorne information for years, protecting his operations, and had undoubtedly provided the details for Jake's ambush. The thought of confronting him, of facing the depth of that treachery, hardened Jake's resolve. The team moved in under the cover of a moonless night, the first flakes of snow beginning to fall. Jake and Rex were at the front, Rex's senses invaluable in navigating the treacherous, snow-covered terrain leading to the complex. The air was thick with anticipation, the quiet hum of adrenaline coursing through Jake's veins. He could feel Rex's controlled excitement beside him, the K-9's powerful body tense with readiness, as they approached the entrance to the old mine. A faint light flickered from within, and the low rumble of heavy machinery echoed from the depths. They were here. Thorne was here. The confrontation was imminent. Jake looked down at Rex, who met his gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. They had faced death together in this very forest. Now, they would face justice. The air inside the abandoned mine complex was thick with the metallic tang of damp earth and the acrid scent of diesel fuel. Muted voices echoed through the cavernous entrance as Jake, Rex, Miller, and the tactical team moved stealthily through the first tunnel. Rex, his nose twitching, led the way, his body low to the ground, every muscle coiled with controlled anticipation. His senses were alive, picking up the subtle changes in air currents, the faint human sense. Guiding them deeper into the labyrinth, they found Thorne's operation in a vast, subterranean chamber, carved centuries ago. High-tech equipment hummed, illuminating stacks of packed minerals. Several armed men, Thorne's enforcers, were busy loading crates onto modified all-terrain vehicles. And there, Overseeing it all was Marcus Thorne himself, his face grimly determined. Suddenly, a voice boomed from behind them. "Freeze, police!" The raid was on. Chaos erupted. Thorne's men scrambled for their weapons, and a volley of gunfire ripped through the echoing space. Jake pushed Rex behind a large rock formation, drawing his own weapon. He had trained for this, but the close quarters of the mine, combined with the low light and the echoing gunfire, made it a disorienting, deadly ballet. Thorne, ever the opportunist, didn't hesitate. He barked orders at his men, then made a dash for a smaller, darkened tunnel at the far end of the chamber. Clearly an escape route. "Thorne's escaping," Miller yelled, laying down suppressing fire. "Rex, with me," Jake commanded, and the K-9 surged forward, a blur of muscle and fur. Rex was surprisingly fast, navigating the uneven terrain with ease. Hot on Thorne's heels, Jake followed, his chest still aching, but adrenaline overriding the pain. The chase led them through a network of narrow, twisting tunnels. Thorne was agile, but Rex was relentless, his barks echoing, driving Thorne deeper into the dark. Suddenly, Thorne stumbled, tripping over a loose rock. He spun, bringing up a custom-made pistol, the very weapon that had nearly killed Jake. "Stay back, dog," Thorne snarled, aiming directly at Rex. But Rex was too quick. With a burst of speed, he launched himself forward, knocking the gun from Thorne's hand with a powerful bite to the wrist. Thorne screamed, clutching his injured hand, his face contorted with pain and fury. Just as Jake caught up, another figure emerged from a side tunnel, a familiar, hated face, Captain Davies. Davies held a pistol, aimed not at Thorne, but at Jake. "You really think you could take us down?" "Carter?" Davies sneered, his eyes filled with a chilling malice. "You're a fool. This network is too big. You should have stayed dead in that snowstorm." A cold shock ran through Jake. To hear the betrayal voiced so openly, so cruelly, was a visceral blow. Rex, sensing the shift in dynamics, positioned himself protectively in front of Jake, a low growl rumbling in his chest. His gaze locked on Davies. "It's over." "Davies," Jake said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "We have everything. The ledgers, the hard drive. Your whole operation is compromised." Davies laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You think a few files will bring down an empire? I'll be gone before the sun rises, and you'll be joining your partner in the grave." He raised his gun, his finger tightening on the trigger, but before Davies could fire, a flash of movement. Miller, having followed Jake, appeared behind Davies in a swift, practiced move. Miller disarmed the corrupt captain, slamming him against the tunnel wall. "It's over. Davies, you're under arrest." Thorne, seeing his last hope gone, tried to make a desperate lunge for his dropped weapon, but Rex was faster with a powerful lunge. The K-9 pinned Thorne to the ground, his teeth bared in a warning snarl, a clear message that further resistance was futile. The rest of the tactical team arrived, securing Thorne and Davies. The mine, once a hub of illicit activity, was now filled with the shouts of officers and the clinking of handcuffs. Justice, long delayed, was finally being served. Jake looked down at Rex, who had released Thorne, now sitting panting, his eyes bright with triumph. The loyal K-9 had not only saved his life, but had played an undeniable role in dismantling a vast criminal enterprise. The wound, the betrayal, the storm, it had all led to this moment of vindication. The aftermath of the Blackwood mine raid sent shockwaves through the region and beyond. News of Marcus Thorne's sophisticated smuggling ring and the deep corruption within local law enforcement, including the stunning betrayal by Captain Davies, dominated headlines for weeks. The sheer scale of the operation, coupled with the dramatic story of Officer Jake Carter and his K-9 partner Rex, captivated the public. Jake, despite his lingering physical recovery, found himself thrust into the public eye. He and Rex became symbols of unwavering loyalty and the relentless pursuit of justice. The media swarmed, eager to tell the story of the wounded K-9 who refused to leave his unconscious officer in a snowstorm, and the detective who then, with his K-9 partner, brought down an empire of crime. The police department, eager to restore public trust, held a press conference. Chief Thompson, his face grim but proud, stood alongside a still-recovering Jake and a stoic Rex, who wore a Medal of Valor specially crafted for him. Today, we stand here not just to announce a major victory against organized crime, Chief Thompson declared, his voice resonating with authority, but to honor true heroism. Officer Jake Carter and his K-9 partner Rex exemplified the very best of law enforcement. Their courage, their resilience, and their unbreakable bond led us to dismantle a network that threatened the very fabric of our community. Rex, in particular, displayed an extraordinary level of loyalty and intelligence, directly contributing to the rescue of Officer Carter and the subsequent success of this operation. Applause erupted, thunderous and heartfelt. Jake, uncomfortable with the spotlight, simply nodded, his hand resting on Rex's head. Rex, for his part, seemed to bask in the attention, his tail giving a few slow thumps against the floor. Awards and accolades poured in. Jake received commendations for bravery and exceptional service. Rex was honored with numerous K-9 service awards, becoming a national sensation. Children sent him fan mail and drawings. Organizations dedicated to police dogs lauded his actions, highlighting the invaluable role of K-9 units in law enforcement. But for Jake, the greatest reward was the quiet restoration of trust. The department, though scarred by the corruption, began a rigorous internal review, purging the bad elements and implementing new oversight measures. The community, initially shaken, slowly began to heal. Seeing the commitment to justice being renewed, Alara Vance, the park ranger who had found them, was also recognized for her quick thinking and bravery. She visited Jake and Rex in the hospital, and a quiet, mutual respect formed between them, forged in the crucible of that blizzard. She returned to her solitary life in the Blackwood Forest, but with a new appreciation for the unexpected connections forged in the wild. The trials of Thorne and Davies were swift and damning. The evidence from the hard drive and ledgers was irrefutable. Thorne was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, his empire crumbling around him. Davies, facing charges of corruption, attempted murder, and aiding and abetting, received an even harsher sentence. A stark reminder that betrayal carried a heavy price. The public's outcry ensured that no stone was left unturned. And the justice system, for once, moved with unprecedented speed and precision in the quiet moments. Away from the cameras and the crowds, Jake often found himself sitting with Rex. He'd scratch behind Rex's ears, and the K-9 would lean into his touch. A silent understanding passing between them. They had faced the deepest betrayal, the harshest elements, and come out stronger. Their bond, once a simple partnership, had become a legend, a testament to the enduring power of loyalty and resilience. The ordeal had been harrowing, but it had stripped away the superficial, revealing the core of what truly mattered: trust, courage, and the unwavering companionship of a faithful friend. The snows of winter finally receded, giving way to the gentle thaw of spring, and with it, a new sense of purpose blossomed for Jake, Carter, and Rex. The old patrol cruiser, now fully repaired, felt different. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was a testament to survival, a rolling symbol of their unbreakable bond. Jake, his chest fully healed, felt a lightness he hadn't known in years. A freedom born from confronting the darkness and emerging victorious. Their first patrol back in Blackwood Forest was poignant. The familiar scent of pine and damp earth filled the air. replacing the sterile hospital smells. Rex, his tail wagging with joyous energy, sniffed at every tree, every rock, as if rediscovering his world. Jake watched him, a profound sense of gratitude swelling in his heart. This forest, once the scene of his near demise and a place of deep betrayal, was now a place of renewed purpose. They continued their K9 duties, but with a heightened sense of vigilance and a deeper understanding of the hidden currents that flowed beneath the surface of seemingly peaceful communities. Rex, sharper than ever, seemed to anticipate Jake's thoughts, his responses intuitive and immediate. Their partnership had transcended training. It was a seamless extension of two beings working as one. The story of Jake and Rex became a legend within the Force, a constant reminder of courage and integrity. New K9 officers looked up to them, seeking advice and inspiration. The bond between handler and dog, always cherished, was now celebrated with renewed fervor, leading to increased funding and support for K9 programs. Beyond their daily patrols, Jake and Rex dedicated themselves to a new mission. They started visiting schools, community centers, and even animal shelters, sharing their story. Jake spoke about resilience, about the importance of trusting one's instincts, and about the quiet heroism of everyday people. Rex, ever the crowd pleaser, demonstrated his skills, charming everyone with his intelligence and gentle nature. Their message resonated deeply. Children learned about loyalty and perseverance. Adults were reminded of the hidden strengths within themselves and the power of doing what is right, even when it's difficult. The story of the wounded K9 who refused to leave his unconscious officer became a powerful narrative of hope, an antidote to cynicism. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the station, addressed simply to Officer Jake Carter and Rex. It was from a young boy, no older than 10, who lived in a neighboring town. He wrote about his own dog, a scruffy terrier mix he'd adopted from a shelter, and how, after hearing their story, he realized the true depth of love and loyalty his own pet offered. The boy enclosed a drawing, a stick figure of a man, and a surprisingly accurate depiction of Rex, standing together, facing a world of fluffy white snow. Jake smiled, tucking the drawing carefully into his locker. It was moments like these, small but profound, that truly mattered. The grand victories against Thorne and Davies were important, but the quiet ripple effect of their story, touching individual lives, was perhaps the greatest triumph of all. As evening fell, Jake and Rex drove out to a quiet overlook in the Blackwood Forest, the same spot where they had often come to clear their heads before the ambush. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long shadows over the trees. Jake reached over and scratched Rex behind the ears. "We did good." "Boy," he whispered, looking out at the vast, peaceful wilderness. Rex leaned against him, a deep sigh of contentment escaping him. The scars remained, both physical and emotional, a permanent reminder of the darkness they had faced. But they were not defined by them. Instead, they were defined by the courage they had found, the loyalty they shared, and the unwavering belief that, even in the coldest storm, goodness and justice would always find a way to prevail. Their journey had not ended, it had merely transformed, leading them towards a new beginning. Together, forever bound by the snow and the secret they had uncovered.